Music, applause. Two children don't just vanish into the air. Not here. Not in this small, tightly woven town where everyone knows everyone else's name, their habits, even their secrets. The disappearance of Lily and Jack Sullivan was never just about two missing children. It's about a truth that's been buried under fear, silence, and carefully crafted stories. In cases like this, there's always someone who saw, someone who heard, someone who's holding on to the piece of the puzzle that could break this wide open. And the longer that person stays silent, the deeper the danger becomes. Not just for Lily and Jack, but for every child in this community. But before we dive into this, kindly subscribe to our channel if you believe in fighting for justice. We've just crossed 500 subscribers, all because of your support. And we need that same energy to reach 4,000, then 5,000, and then 10,000. So, go ahead and drop your fingerprints on that subscribe button. And where are you watching from? Because wherever you are, the day this vision is fulfilled, I will send my appreciation straight to you. Let's keep building this community that fights for justice together. If you've heard these names before, you already know this isn't the first time we've spoken about them. Every detail you're about to hear has been analyzed, dissected, and re-examined for one purpose only: justice. Because Detective Max isn't here to waste your time. We're here for the children. We're here for the truth. And in the end, truth has a way of surfacing. Even if someone's doing everything they can to keep it buried. Two children don't just disappear into thin air. Someone knows. They always know. August sunlight spilled across the quiet road outside the Sullivan home. Lily, her jacket with the metallic star catching the light. Jack a little more withdrawn that morning, but holding on to his sister's side. That was the last confirmed moment anyone can place them. Two small lives moving through an ordinary day that would soon be anything but ordinary. By the end of that day, their presence was gone. Their laughter silenced, and in its place a gaping void quickly filled by conflicting stories, shifting timelines, and the one thing that has held this case hostage from the start: silence. This is not about wild speculation. It's not about finger-pointing without proof. This is about peeling back the layers one by one until we expose the truth hiding behind closed doors. Because in cases like this, the truth doesn't vanish. It waits and it watches. Before we proceed, hold on. Here at Detective Max, we don't just cover these stories. We chase them. We dig. We connect the dots and we give a voice to the details others overlook. And we can't do it without you. If you're watching this and you've been turning over a detail in your mind, no matter how small, put it out there. Drop your theory or an overlooked fact in the comments below. No slander, no baseless accusations, just the truth as you know it, or reasoned ideas that could help point the search in the right direction. In the first days after Lily and Jack Sullivan were reported missing, the town's narrative was carefully shaped, almost manicured, to project calm. Official statements from authorities described an active search and asked the public to remain vigilant. But the emphasis wasn't on urgency. It was on reassurance. The early media coverage followed suit. Headlines leaned into the word mystery, painting the story with a soft focus, like a puzzle that just needed time to solve. There were photos of search parties walking shoulder to shoulder, volunteers handing out flyers, and candlelight vigils held on the church steps. It all looked like a united front. But beneath that surface, the unspoken truth was gnawing at people. This wasn't a remote wilderness where two children could wander miles undetected. This was a tight-knit community, one where you can hear your neighbor's truck start before sunrise, where strangers stand out instantly. And if two children vanish here, the unasked question becomes unavoidable. If no one saw them leave, did they ever leave the town at all? Locals whispered their unease behind closed doors. Careful not to say too much in public, they feared two things. One, that someone they knew might be involved, and two, that the official story was never meant to be the full truth. Every disappearance has a moment when the clock stops ticking forward, a point where the trail goes cold and the narrative begins to fracture. For Lily and Jack Sullivan, that moment is what I call the vanishing point. The last confirmed sighting of the children came from a neighbor's brief interaction, mundane enough to seem harmless, but crucial enough to set the timeline in motion. It was late afternoon. Lily was wearing her familiar jacket, the one with the small metallic star on the sleeve. Jack trailed slightly behind, holding something in his hand. That was it. That's the moment they were still in the world. Then there's the bridge. Not a highway overpass or a landmark you'd find in travel brochures, but a small weathered wooden bridge on a dirt road. A place that serves no purpose unless you already know it's there. From the outside, the public was told it was just part of the search grid. But the reality, search teams concentrated there with an intensity that didn't match the official reasoning. You don't bring in K9 units, sift through mud, and comb both banks of a creek unless you believe something or someone passed that way. And then the silenced GPS tracking data from devices that could have pinpointed movements toward that bridge didn't surface immediately. Trail camera footage from the surrounding area. Footage that could have confirmed vehicles, pedestrians, or anything unusual was not made public for weeks. That delay raises the kind of question no parent wants to hear. Who had access to that data and who decided when or if it would see the light of day? In an investigation like this, control over information is power. And power, when misused, doesn't just hide the truth. It rewrites it. In every missing persons case, names surface quickly. Sometimes because of their closeness to the victims, other times because of the shadows in their stories. In Lily and Jack's disappearance, 3 sets of names rise above the rest, not because they've been proven guilty, but because their lives intersect with the children's in ways that demand scrutiny. First, Malia Brooks Murray, their mother. Publicly, she's been painted with 2 very different brushes. In front of cameras, she's the grieving mother, clutching photographs, speaking in measured tones about wanting her children home. But away from the microphones, there are whispers of instability, past disputes, and a personal life marred by struggles, some emotional, some relational. The gap between the public image and the private reality isn't proof of wrongdoing. But in a case like this, it's the gap where truth often hides. Then there's Daniel Martel, the stepfather figure. In the first days, his name barely registered with the public. But as time passed, the way people spoke about him began to shift. Neighbors who once described him as quiet started using words like controlling and off. His behavior during community searches, showing up sometimes, disappearing other times, didn't match the urgency of a man looking for 2 missing children in his care. And in the court of public opinion, silence is rarely neutral. Finally, the neighbors and friends, the overlooked layer in any investigation. Many of them gave official statements that sounded supportive, cooperative, almost scripted. But when the cameras turned off in hushed conversations over fences and in corner booths, their words took on a different edge. Stories about late-night arguments, about the children showing up at other houses looking for food, about odd cars seen near the dirt road leading to the wooden bridge. These are not wild theories. These are first-hand fragments, pieces of a puzzle that someone somewhere is hoping will never fit together. The question is, are these just the usual tensions of small-town life, or are they the cracks in the facade that could lead straight to the truth? In every missing persons case, certain names begin to orbit the investigation, like planets around a dying star. They aren't always the ones who are guilty. Sometimes they're the ones who are simply closest. But proximity matters. In this case, proximity could be everything. The first name is the one you expect. Malia Brooks Murray, the mother of Lily and Jack. To the public, her image was carefully framed. The grieving parent, soft-spoken, holding photographs of her children as if the weight of them could keep her from falling apart. On television, she pleaded for information with a voice that trembled just enough to pull at the heart. But that's not the only Malia the town knows. In private, there's another story. A woman wrestling with personal demons. There are accounts of strained relationships, heated arguments behind closed doors, and sudden disappearances for hours at a time. There are whispers, always whispers, that the children had sometimes been left in the care of people the neighbors didn't know, people they wouldn't have trusted. It's not proof of guilt, but in an investigation, patterns in behavior are as revealing as fingerprints, and the truth often hides in those patterns. Then we move to Daniel Martel, a man whose role was initially downplayed in the official story. Early on, his name barely came up in interviews, as though he were a background character in someone else's tragedy. But as the days turned into weeks, the way people spoke about him began to change. Neighbors who once called him quiet now described him as controlling or secretive. Some said his presence felt heavy, as if every conversation had to go through him first. During search efforts, he appeared inconsistent, showing up at some gatherings, avoiding others. And when he did speak to people, there was a strange undercurrent statements that felt less like a man desperate to find 2 children, and more like a man managing what others thought of him. And then there's the neighbors and friends. Those whose houses are just a few steps away, whose windows may have seen things no one has put on record. Publicly, many of them said the right things, supportive, calm, measured. But away from reporters' microphones, in kitchen corners and driveway conversations, a different tone emerged. There were stories of Lily showing up at a neighbor's door asking for food. Accounts of Jack with what looked like a fading bruise under his eye. Reports unverified but consistent of unfamiliar cars idling near the dirt road that led to the wooden bridge days before the children were gone. None of these fragments on their own tell us the whole truth. But when you stack them together, they form the outline of a shadow, something just out of sight, but close enough to feel. And in this case, that shadow isn't a stranger in the dark. It's someone within reach. So the question stands, are these just small-town rumors or the cracks in a carefully constructed facade? And if they are cracks, how much longer before the entire story falls through? Silence is never neutral. In a case like this, it can protect the innocent or shield the guilty. And in the town where Lily and Jack disappeared, silence became the unspoken rule. From the beginning, local authorities kept their words measured. Press conferences were short, their statements carefully scripted. We are exploring all possibilities. The investigation is ongoing. We cannot comment further at this time. These phrases might sound routine, but they felt different here. Less like standard procedure, more like something where someone was being protected. And when reporters pressed about child protective services, the room seemed to shift. There were no clear answers about whether CPS had been involved before the disappearance, no confirmation if prior welfare checks had been conducted. It was as if the paper trail, if it existed, had been folded up and locked away. For those who'd heard stories about the children's home life, about past visits from officials, this lack of clarity wasn't just frustrating, it was damning. Then there's the fear. A quiet, creeping fear that threads itself through this community. It's not the fear of a stranger lurking in the shadows. It's the fear of consequences. The fear of speaking up and finding your name dragged into something you can't step out of. In some cases, it's the fear of social exile, being shunned in a town where everyone knows your face. In others, it's more personal, more dangerous. People worry about retaliation. They worry about jobs, reputations, even safety. And so they talk in private in hushed voices over kitchen tables, then fall silent when a microphone appears. The result, a web of silence, sticky, suffocating, and almost impossible to navigate without becoming ensnared yourself. The most unsettling part is that this web wasn't built overnight. It was woven over years from overlapping threads of loyalty, fear, and quiet deals made behind closed doors. And if you trace those threads far enough, they all seem to lead back to the same handful of people, which raises the question, is the truth about Lily and Jack's disappearance locked away because of incompetence or because too many people have something to lose if it comes out? Disappearances don't happen in a vacuum. In the weeks, maybe even months before Lily and Jack vanished, there were signs. Not loud headline-grabbing signs, but subtle unnerving ripples that hinted something inside that household was off balance. Neighbors noticed tension, raised voices drifting from behind closed windows on quiet evenings. The kind of arguments where the words are muffled, but the tone carries, sharp, cutting, and relentless. Some chalked it up to stress, others to normal family disputes. But in hindsight, those moments feel less like background noise and more like warning shots. Out in public, Lily and Jack's demeanor began to shift. Friends at school described Lily as once talkative and bright, but in the final weeks, she became quieter, avoiding eye contact, picking at her sleeves during conversations. Jack, normally restless and playful, seemed withdrawn, as if he was constantly listening for something no one else could hear. And then there were the rumors. Stories passed from one kitchen table to another about incidents at home, minor injuries explained away, missed days at school, and unexplained absences. Some of these stories were whispered to the right people, teachers, relatives, even local officials, but they didn't seem to travel far enough to spark a formal investigation. If records exist, they've never surfaced publicly. One account that surfaced later described seeing Lily at the local store with what looked like a faint bruise on her jaw. Another claimed Jack had shown up to school one day with a swollen lip. Both incidents were brushed off with simple explanations. Falling off a bike, roughhousing with friends, and maybe that's all they were. But when you gather these fragments and hold them together, the picture that forms is far more troubling. These weren't isolated moments. They were patterns. And patterns almost always point to something deeper. The question is how many people saw those red flags and chose not to act, and why. Every missing persons case has its public theories, the ones shared openly on social media, debated over coffee at the diner, and repeated in news interviews. But here, in the case of Lily and Jack Sullivan, there's another layer. The theories people don't say out loud. The ones that live in hushed conversations exchanged only with people they trust. The first is what some call the protective disappearance theory. It suggests that Malia Brooks Murray didn't lose her children at all, that she took them or arranged for them to be taken to shield them from something worse. It's a theory that hinges on fear, the kind you don't put into words unless you've lived it. If true, it would mean she's not a grieving mother, but a mother in hiding, operating under a plan no one else is allowed to know. But if that's the case, why no signal, no note, no breadcrumb trail for those who care about the children? The second is far darker. The foul play theory. In this version, Lily and Jack didn't vanish voluntarily. They were removed, taken, silenced, not by strangers, but by people who knew them, people close enough to move unnoticed through their lives. The whispers behind this theory connected to things the children might have seen, heard, or experienced, things someone wanted buried forever. And then there's the one that's barely a theory at all. More a gut suspicion that threads through everything. The cover-up theory. The idea that someone close to the family, maybe even inside the family, knows exactly what happened and is being protected. Whether that protection comes from loyalty, fear, or mutual guilt is anyone's guess. These theories rarely leave private circles, not because people don't believe them, but because in a town this small, speaking certain thoughts out loud can change your life. It can turn neighbors into enemies. It can make doors close that once stood open. And yet the silence doesn't erase the questions. If anything, it makes them louder. In missing persons cases, especially when children are involved, time is the single most valuable currency. Every hour matters. Every decision shapes the outcome. And in the disappearance of Lily and Jack Sullivan, those first hours were squandered. The first critical day saw more conversation than action. Search teams were mobilized late. Doors that should have been knocked on within minutes weren't visited until the following morning. And by then, any trace, any footprint, any overlooked item could have been lost to the night, to weather, or to deliberate removal. Certain areas that in hindsight seem obvious, weren't touched in those early sweeps. The wooden bridge, for example, a place that would later draw focused search efforts, was at first barely mentioned. Why was it oversight? Or was it that someone didn't want that place looked at too soon, and while the search staggered forward, misinformation bloomed like wildfire? One false lead after another was passed around the town square through social media threads and in overheard phone calls. A car no one could identify, a sighting that never happened, a story of the children being seen miles away that was later proven impossible. These stories weren't harmless. They pulled resources away from where they were needed, leaving real leads to grow cold. The cruelest part, many of these rumors didn't come from outsiders. They started here inside the community, from people who should have wanted clarity, not confusion. And whether by accident or intent, those distorted narratives made it that much harder to separate truth from noise. In the end, the clock didn't just tick forward, it worked against them. And the question remains, if those first hours had been handled differently, would we still be talking about Lily and Jack as missing? In every unsolved disappearance, there's a wall of silence. And walls aren't built without purpose. When Lily and Jack Sullivan vanished, people wanted to believe it was a tragic accident or a cruel twist of fate. That's the comforting version, the version that lets everyone sleep at night. But the longer you look at the evidence, the longer you trace the timelines, the access to data, the contradictions, the more that comforting version collapses. Silence here feels intentional. The motives for hiding the truth are rarely pure. Sometimes it's about protection, not of the children, but of the adults whose actions, if revealed, would ruin them. There's the mother, Malia Brooks Murray, and the swirling storm of public perception around her. Some see a grieving parent. Others whisper about instability, choices, and past failures. There's Daniel Martel, the stepfather, whose behavior shifted in the days after the children were gone. His tone, his body language, his very presence described differently by the same people just weeks apart. Protection here might mean protecting a reputation, a marriage, or a network of influence. And then there's shame, the kind that keeps people awake at night, but too afraid to speak. Shame over not intervening when something seemed wrong. Shame over prioritizing convenience over conscience. Shame over knowing deep down that your silence makes you part of the story. But the strongest glue holding secrets together. Fear. Fear of retaliation. Fear of losing your livelihood. Fear of speaking against someone who has power. Whether that's financial, social, or even tied to local law enforcement. In a small town, fear doesn't need to be shouted. It's past. In looks, in cold shoulders, in whispered warnings. And yet, the truth serves someone. That's the part people often forget. In Lily and Jack's case, who benefits from the truth staying buried? Could it be the person or people directly responsible? Could it be those whose inaction allowed whatever happened to happen? Or could it be someone who knows the real story would lead investigators toward a much larger, more dangerous truth, one this town is not ready to face? We've seen this before in other rural tight-knit towns where children disappear. There's an almost rehearsed pattern. In the beginning, everyone is loud. There are vigils, interviews, community searches. But as the weeks pass, the story shrinks. People stop talking. Officials start using vague, non-committal language. Leads that once seemed urgent quietly fade. And those who ask too many questions suddenly find themselves on the outside. Look closely and you'll see those same shadows here, the same guarded responses, the same deflections, the same reluctance to push too hard. Because the moment someone does, they're treated not as a concerned citizen, but as a problem. And just like in those other cases, there's one chilling possibility: no one will say out loud. Someone already knows what happened to Lily and Jack Sullivan. They've decided that keeping that truth hidden, whether for self-preservation, loyalty, or fear, serves them better than justice ever could. And until that changes, this case will stay exactly where it is, cold, closed off, and buried beneath layers of silence. Someone in this story knows more than they've said. And if they're listening right now, the clock is ticking. Secrets have a way of rotting in the dark. They stain everything they touch. Families, friendships, entire communities, and in the end, they always come to light. Whether through a confession, a mistake, or a witness who decides they can't live with the weight anymore, the truth always finds its way out. But the longer it's buried, the colder Lily and Jack's trail becomes, evidence fades, memories blur, and those who could have spoken lose their chance to do the right thing. That's why the next move doesn't belong to law enforcement alone. It belongs to every person who's ever seen something, heard something, or felt something wasn't right. If you're watching this and you've been turning over a detail in your mind, no matter how small, put it out there. Drop your theory or an overlooked fact in the comments below. No slander, no baseless accusations, just the truth as you know it, or reasoned ideas that could help point the search in the right direction. Because Lily and Jack didn't just vanish. They were taken from us by someone's hands or someone's silence. And until that silence breaks, their story remains unfinished. The question is, who will speak first? Someone in this story knows more than they've said. And if they're listening right now, the clock is ticking. Secrets have a way of rotting in the dark. They stain everything they touch. Families, friendships, entire calm, and in the end, they always come to light. Whether through a confession, a mistake, or a witness who decides they can't live with the weight anymore, the truth always finds its way out. But the longer it's buried, the colder Lily and Jack's trail becomes. Evidence fades, memories blur, and those who could have spoken lose their chance to do the right thing. That's why the next move doesn't belong to law enforcement alone. It belongs to every person who's ever seen something, heard something, or felt something wasn't right. Here at Detective Max, we don't just cover these stories. We chase them. We dig, we connect the dots, and we give a voice to the details others overlook. And we can't do it without you. If you're watching this and you've been turning over a detail in your mind, no matter how small, put it out there. Drop your theory or an overlooked fact in the comments below. No slander, no baseless accusations, just the truth as you know it, or reasoned ideas that could help point the search in the right direction. Because Lily and Jack didn't just vanish, they were taken from us by someone's hands or someone's silence. And until that silence breaks, their story remains unfinished. This is Detective Max, and we're not done yet.